are really local celebrities right now. And in fact, in the car on the way over to tape this segment, I spoke with Alan Bowden. He's the manager, and he was about to go on with ABC News for an interview. So it just kind of gives you some scope of how big of a deal this thing is, and just an outstanding story. It's been 25 years. It was Central Springfield in 1994 was the last time a team from Virginia, not just Northern Virginia, made it to Williamsport for the Little League World Series. And it's just been a story that just kind of has gained more momentum as it's gone along, gained more and more of a following, to the point where now other leagues are driving all the way up to Williamsport and supporting them, and everyone's just kind of rallying around this group of kids, and it's really cool. It's a really, really cool story.
Yeah, it seems like it's been a really cool thing for the community. I mean, I've been hearing about how they've been having watch parties at Glory Days for some of these for these kids. And you mentioned the manager, Alan Bowden, and he's got a pretty cool story involving his father and just how this whole team relates to the Little League World Series, doesn't he?
Absolutely. His father played for Hampton with Little League, and he was on that team in 1954 that made it to the World Series. I think it was just the second or third team from Virginia that had made it up there at the time. And so here we are 65 years later, and now we've got his son managing the team and his grandson, Michael, playing in the World Series. So, just a really neat story. And I know the grandfather is up there supporting him, and he's been interviewed. You've seen him, on ESPN and all these major networks being interviewed while he's watching the game. So that's just got to be a tremendous thrill for the entire family.
Yeah, and just this whole experience. I mean, you were up there in Williamsport for a couple of the games. It has to be an incredible atmosphere, doesn't it?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, that's. I went up Saturday, Sunday. They played on Sunday. That's when they beat the team from Minnesota to advance to tonight's game. Tonight they play Hawaii, and of course the winner goes to the U.S. Championship game. And then the winner of that would then play on Sunday in the actual Little League World Series against the team that gets through the international bracket. But what an atmosphere! I tell people it's Disney World for baseball fans. Basically, is the best way that you can describe it. I mean, I'm a grown man, and I was having every bit as much fun while I was up there as the kids. 15,444 fans were at that game that I was at on Sunday. And, you think, wow, man, that must be a record. And I think it's like 10,000 more that they can jam into that, into LeMade Stadium for the bigger games. And my guess is this weekend with, us having, a relatively short drive, 3.5 hours, if they get to Saturday, I can't imagine how many more people are just going to want to make that trip up. So just a really cool atmosphere.
Yeah, wow, 10,000 more in Williamsport. I mean, that's incredible. So it's up to 25,000 people can fit there.
Yeah, so I should have probably been a little bit better about doing my research and homework. But yeah, I think it was 25 to 30,000, somewhere in that ballpark is the record that they've had jammed into that stadium, and just a really historical stadium, LeMade Stadium. So to kind of give you an idea, if you go up there, they have the international bracket games are being played at Volunteer Stadium, which is adjacent to LeMade. And, both of these ballparks, the entire complex sits, it's along the Susquehanna River on the side of a mountain. So, you're driving up, and it's an easy drive, which is what I like. You're not sitting on 95 and fighting traffic, and you're going, and then all of a sudden you're zigzagging through some neighborhood, and boom, here's this gigantic complex with these two stadiums. And then Sunday as well, you have the Little League Classic. The Major League Baseball started a few years ago, so it was the Cubs and the Pirates playing. So you've got the Cubs and Pirates players there that are interacting with the kids, because the kids stay right on the complex in the dorms. So, and they have all 16 teams right there staying together in these upscale dormitories with these rec rooms and the cafeteria. But the Pirates players and the Cubs players are in there, and they're playing foosball and ping pong, and video games with the kids, and the kids, of course, are hamming it up because these are their heroes, and then you get some of the guys on the Cubs like Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant, even their manager Joe Madden got up on the hill, which is, I'm sure everybody has seen it. The kids jumping on the cardboard boxes and sliding down the hill. So again, Disney World for baseball fans, man. That's the best way to describe it.
Now you would think playing in front of their idols and all these people for these kids would bring a lot of pressure onto them, but for this Loudoun South team, it seems like the pressure has almost brought the best out of them. I mean, not only have they made the Little League World Series, but their 2 games have been pretty historic, haven't they?
Absolutely. Starting in the regionals is where they start with these televised games. So, in the Southeast Regional, you're getting games that are broadcast on the ESPN networks, and so they kind of get used to it with the cameras. I remember talking to Coach Bowden. He said initially it was a lot to handle when you get to that point where you're seeing all the cameras and everything. But by the time you play in the regional championship, they're kind of used to it. And then obviously every single game in Williamsport is on the ESPN family of networks. And then once you get to this weekend, it's actually on ABC, which is what a cool experience for these kids. And they've got some tremendous moxie and poise to be able to go out and perform on this stage and not have it affect them. And you're seeing the graphic up there. I mean, those 5 guys right there, those are the top 5 hitters in their lineup right there. Chase Obskart, and you got Brady Yates, Justin Lee, Colton Hicks, Liam Thean. Those 5 guys have really been the anchor of this team. And when they beat Minnesota the other night, and it was an 11-0 game, I think there were 7 for 9, 3 walks, 10 RBIs between those guys. But every, any good team is going to have multiple guys who can step up on any given night. And this team is a perfect example of that. They all have their moments. Justin Lee, he might be the most popular player in Williamsport right now. But it's not just him. And you see some picture there of Justin. You have everyone that's had their moments. Chase Obskart hit a walk-off to beat Georgia, the team that beat Loudoun South in the regional championship last year. Obskart hit a walk-off to beat them in the semifinals. Brady Yates had a big in their 3-0 win to start things against Rhode Island in Williamsport last week. Brady Yates hit the 2-run home run. Liam Thean, and he had 5 RBIs in the game the other day. So all these guys are really stepping up and having big moments, and Justin, he threw a 4-inning no-hitter in the game on Sunday, which is a tremendous accomplishment in itself. But then when you also consider the fact that him, Liam, and Chase combined on a no-hitter in the first game, so they literally they just haven't given up a hit in 2 games. So in 73 years of the Little League World Series, you've only had that happen 6 times. I mean, you want to talk about an historical accomplishment. So these guys really are kind of the hottest ticket up there. If you like SportsCenter, they're on SportsCenter the other night, getting interviewed. So, really cool experience. And, another point that Coach Bowden made to me and on the ride over here when I was talking to him is these kids, when they started practicing, so the Little League, the All-Star process was all starting while they were still in school in June. They start school in Loudoun County, I believe, this week. I think it's tomorrow or Friday. So it's literally been their entire summer that these guys have been together between the District 16 tournament, the Virginia tournament, which was down south, the southern part of the state, then going down to Georgia for the regionals, and now up to Williamsport for the World Series. So I think he said 83 days they've had like 3 or 4 days off of baseball. So,
wow.
If they didn't like each other and know each other before this, they certainly are pretty comfortable and familiar with each other at this point.
And now this is actually, you were talking to me a little about this before we went on air, but you said, so this is the same team that made it to the regional finals last year, but there's not a single player
Yeah.
that was on that team
Sure.
that's on this one.
And I mean, how cool is that? So you know, 13 players. That's what they can put on a roster. You had 13 players on Sean Lizama. He was the manager of last year's team that went 14-2, and their only 2 losses were to Georgia. And so it's a double elimination tournament, and Georgia got them twice. And then of course Georgia went on to the Little League World Series, made it to the U.S. Championship game. They lost to the team from Honolulu, who ended up beating, I believe it was Japan, to win the Little League World Series last year. But I think that that may have served as some motivation for these kids this year. You know, I mean, not only are they, you know, wanting to do it for themselves, but there was some redemption factor, and I think that they were pretty excited that Peachtree City from Georgia got back to that point, because you know they wanted to get after him after what happened last year. And, you know, Brady Yates, his older brother, was a major part of that team last year, so I know he was down there supporting him as well. And that's got to be pretty cool, though. Little brother had your back like that and got you over the hump.
Yeah, it's just such an just cool story all around about how the communities really has completely come together around this team. But we've used the word historic a couple times, and I just want you to give us some context into just how historic this run is for the state of Virginia and how rare it is that we get to watch a team like this.
Sure, absolutely. You know, they you know, we said 25 years, you know, it's a quarter of a century since Central Springfield made it, and they had a lot. Teams from Virginia had gotten to the Southeast Region Championship game 5 times since then and lost every time, including the Loudoun South team last year. So, you know, that gives you some perspective as well. But, you know, Virginia has gone up there and hasn't had a ton of success over the years. I think coming into, in fact, I know, not I think, coming into this tournament, Virginia teams were 8-12. And their trips up there over the previous 72 years. So now you've got this team that's already 2-0 and is 1 win from just becoming the 3rd team to make it to the U.S. Championship game. I think it was 1976 Tuckahoe, which is out of Richmond, and then that Central Springfield team. Those are the only 2 teams that have made it that far. And granted, the format of the Little League World Series has changed over the years. Initially, you know, there wasn't the international side of the bracket. In fact, initially, even after they brought international teams into it, it was still for a little while a single elimination format. So I mean, imagine you bring teams from Asia, from the Caribbean, from Europe, and a lot of times they're one and done, you know. And I think they may have given them some consolation games, but from the actual tournament standpoint, it was a single elimination tournament. So that, I think, gives you some historical perception. And you know, and talking to some other reporters up there, some people around Little League baseball, and then just kind of being the baseball nerd that I am, doing my own research, these guys got a legitimate shot to go and win this thing. I mean, I tell you, that team they're going to play tonight from Hawaii is good. That Japanese team on the other side, I think they've outscored their first 2 opponents 27-0, is really good. So it's not going to be an easy task. But, you know, just from talking to Coach Bowden several times, you know, I mean, he keeps reiterating, you know, how he wants his players to enjoy it and how they, you know, they feel fortunate. You know, obviously they're good. You have to be good, but sometimes you have to be lucky. And they've just had all these things that have fallen into place. And I think he has a great approach to this, and how, you know, he's a lawyer, so he's kind of got that, you know, presence to him, that demeanor. Even if you hear it when he's mic'd up on ESPN and how he talks to the kids. And I think that he's really been a calming influence with these guys, and has helped them when they see the cameras come on and they're on national television and they're playing in these big games. And he said it a couple times. He's like, you know, every single game that we play is now the biggest game of your life. That being said, you know, I want you to take everything in and enjoy it as well. So I think in some aspects he's done a great job of kind of whether it's serving, you know, distracting the kids, or just actually taking the pressure off them. And I mean, he is the definition of a manager. That's why I refer him to a manager. I think that's what their official title is with these. They're managers. They're not head coaches, and there is a difference. And he's had to manage them, and he's done a tremendous job.
So, talking a little bit about the game tonight, you mentioned a little bit. Would you say they're favorites, underdogs, or pretty 50-50 against this Hawaii team, in your opinion?
And that's tough. And I talked to Alan, I talked to Brian Triplett. He's one of the assistant coaches. Tripp played at George. He was at Lake Braddock, George Mason, so I've known him for years. And he's like, you dig through Game Changer, you watch film, you do what you can, but until you actually, lace them up and get on the field with the team, it's kind of tough. And even Liam Thien in the press conference after the game on Sunday, I was impressed just with his answer to a couple questions when he said, every single game we come into, we don't know, if we're better, if that team's better. So I know I'm giving you a long-winded answer to a simple question. I think it's just tough to tell. I will say this, if you just on paper, if you look at results and I think the Hawaiian team's hitting the shade over 300 since the beginning of regionals. So they're 4 regional games and 2 World Series games, whereas Loudon South is hitting like 430 something as a team. Loudon South, they've been pummeling some teams and throwing up all sorts of gaudy offensive numbers. Justin Lee is. You want to talk about some numbers? He's hitting 617, 15 home runs in 20 games. But you got some of these other guys that Chase has hit 10 home runs, and so if you look on paper, you think, well, Loudon South might be the favorite. They're beating teams by a wider margin, but until you actually get out there on the field in this on this stage, I think it's tough to tell. And the other thing with the Hawaiians is they beat the team, the Honolulu team that won the Little League World Series last year. That's who Central East Maui, who's the Little League that Loudon South is playing tonight, they beat them in their state final, and they had to do it in a playback. So Honolulu, it's a double elimination state tournament. Honolulu beat them, and they had to, Central East Maui had to come back and then beat the Honolulu. So I think that tells you that there's some pretty good makeup with this Hawaiian team as well.
And then just finally, for anyone that's going to watch the game tonight, what do you think are some of the things they should just, keep an eye out for? What do you think are kind of the highlights of this team for anyone that maybe hasn't watched them on the run yet?
Yeah.
That if someone's going to tune in tonight, what are the can't miss aspects?
Well, Justin Lee is going to get the ball again, so it'll actually be 3 games in a row that he's going to be the starting pitcher. But because of how good Bowden and his coaching staff have been with managing the pitch counts, because everything with Little League and all the way through high school, it's based on your pitch count to keep kids eligible. But they got Justin out at the 35 pitch threshold in their game on Friday so that he could come back on Sunday. And then he was efficient, even with 6 strikeouts and 4 innings, he was efficient to stay going into his last batter under the 50 pitch threshold that kept him eligible to now pitch tonight. So keep an eye on, what his workload is. My guess is they're going to throw some different looks at Hawaii. They'll go with Justin. Liam Thien is the lefty. I tell you, Brady Yates is a really good pitcher. And just because of how good Liam and Justin have been, they haven't really had to throw him. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we maybe see him. The thing that you have to take into account from a pitching standpoint, though, is if you lose tonight, whoever loses this game has to play tomorrow, and then they're going to play whoever's come through the losers bracket tomorrow, and the winner of that game will then play the winner of tonight's game on Saturday for the U.S. final. So, while obviously you focus just on this game, you control what you can control, you do what you can to win that game that's in front of you. I think in the back of your mind, you get later into the game, you do have to kind of consider, okay, we want to make sure that we keep some arms available for tomorrow that are going to help us win in a potential elimination game.
All right. Well, it's been an incredible run for the Loudon South Little League team. And, it's still a couple games away, but they have a chance to be the first team from Virginia to win the national side of the bracket. But still, they got to win at least a couple more games to get there. But it's been a pleasure talking to you, Joey. Once again, Joey Kamide from Nova Baseball Magazine. He's broke down the incredible run for Loudon South, and you'll want to be sure to check that out here on DMVSTREAM.com.
This content is brought to you by Dental Associates. For more than 39 years, Dr. Stephen Price has been practicing dentistry in Northern Virginia. A member of the American Dental Association, the Northern Virginia Dental Society, and the Virginia Dental Society, Price is considered an expert in Invisalign and continues to be an award-winning innovator in the industry.